Hello, Kathryn here. Welcome to my channel and welcome to this video. I'm going to be talking about using Google Translate as one of the many tools in your toolbox when it comes to studying languages. Now, for me personally, Google Translate has been invaluable, especially for languages that are really close to English. Of course, given that Google is pretty much an English thing based out of America, it makes sense that it's going to do great with languages that are structurally similar, and also just because I guess it has a lot of background, a lot of experience with it. Look, I don't really know the ins and outs of this thing. I just use it, but the many, probably hundreds of hours that I've used this thing, I've noticed that you need to have a lot of caution, especially with languages that aren't European. In my experience anyway, Persian or Farsi has been a nightmare. You have to know when to use it, which phrases to use. You'll see. But first I'm going to start with French just to show an example of a language they're pretty good with. There we are. I'm just going to type in from a news story. I tend to like to translate news stories, so. You can see, if I do make errors, it will pop up suggestions, but for the most part, it knows what's going on. Oh, that's not it. There it is. Now, as you can see, I have quite a bit of experience using French with this thing. It's not really struggling with it, right? Pretty standard. In the early days, I would rapidly switch between a tab with the news story and this to see how quickly I could bring the input over to here and switch back, and how much, I wanted it to get faster. I wanted to remember more words. And yeah, this is extremely helpful. Now, that's not to say that you should use this entirely. You need to understand how things are being conjugated, what tense they're using, and just be careful. French has a lot of idioms, just like English, but for the most part, it will be able to translate that for you. Now let's switch to Persian. For anyone who doesn't know, Persian uses a modified Arabic script. Here's a little keyboard down here. So I had to learn what all these letters were. And in the beginning, I had to really zoom in. It might be helpful if we zoomed in. All right. Farsi is very small, and it took quite some time for me to be able to read it when it's itty bitty. All right, so I'm gonna put some of this in here. Let's see how it looks. And I will have to check and see what they're saying is wrong, you can see there's already a lot of issues, and I have to decide for myself, are they right? Chances are they're not. You can see I'm much slower than I am with French. This takes a long time, so I need to... Okay, so if I went by this, how does that change it? So I need to consider, have I transcribed something incorrectly? Is this the word I want? Instead of... It doesn't really seem to be a huge difference, right? So how do I know? The problem is... Okay, there's that one. I don't even remember. It was, I think it was one of the diacritics. It's a different, but I have a hard time remembering how to put it in there. Sometimes I do it by accident, but some things are pretty easy. But yeah, you need to decide, okay, this is a preposition. How is it used? Will it change? See that? So this is probably a construction, verb construction here. Let's see. Try this. Corona. What? Alright. Effects on sanctions America, and this is going to be, I know that the verb goes at the end. I check back on my text that I wrote down, or that I'm just translating from a website or whatever. It looks like it's pretty much done correctly. So this is a question. So it begins, if you just did this, I guess, somewhat literally, like Corona, what effects on sanctions America, and then of course the rest of the verb is like, how will affect. So you need to figure out, okay, so how will in English is separated from affect, right? So you need to look at the translated bit, and if you haven't studied the grammar, then it's difficult to tell if at the end there, is that in the future tense? Is it the same thing? Now here's the problem. Without a really good study aid, you have to figure this out on your own. Yeah. You need to figure out how to bring it back into an infinitive form. Now remember what it said? Does that make any sense? It's a lot of trial and error to figure out what it means. I can't find a good book like I can with the others, and I can't rely on Google Translate either. I have to sit here and laboriously go through and figure out what is meant, which verb it is, how to spell it. Never even mind how to pronounce it. So yeah, maybe I spelled that wrong because I had it with, yeah. by the way, it's really weird to understand somewhat a language that you can barely pronounce. I am far less comfortable with this than I am with French, even though I find French not super hard to pronounce, but it's not easy either. Is that right? This is another part that's confused me a lot. Again, the verb goes at the end there, but I have to decide, like, is this the conjugated bit here? What tense is it in? Some of these I know are prepositions, like dar here. Others I know this is corona here, so it's probably this right here. If I know that an adjective goes after a noun usually, then this is probably expansion, right? And this right here could imply possession. But it could also just be part of the spelling. See, I have to figure that out. I know this is Tehran. This is Washington. So, and I know that this is, I think this is, yeah, against Washington, against Tehran. So this is sanctions in, yeah, does your head in. Now, I can use this for an hour or so at a time, but it is so much slower, even after a couple years with Farsi. That's not to say it doesn't have some value, but again, until I can find a good book or something, it's hard to explain to English speakers how the underlying logic of the language. And what you have to do is just become familiar with it, and you can start to see, you know, some of the patterns. But it's literal gibberish for a very long time. And using this, yeah, very, very slowly you'll improve. But you have to devote a lot more active work into the translation and reflecting and making the patterns and repeating it and listening to it, pronouncing it. And for this to become something that is natural to me, it will probably take about 5 years. I know that's a long time, but I'm being realistic here. I think that, you know, anyone who says they're a polyglot or they've studied languages extensively should be honest about the how much time it takes and how much work it is. The truth is, I've put in 2 years nearly, off and on, but hundreds of hours with Farsi. And you see how much slower I am. So this is why it's considered a hard language. The Foreign Service Institute, which is the part of I guess it's a branch, or kind of like not a branch, an agency, I suppose, or it serves an agency, Department of State. They categorize languages based on difficulty for English speakers, and Farsi, I believe, is in category, I want to say 3 because they've redesigned it. It was in 4. And the one category higher only has like 6 languages in it, including Arabic. So Arabic supposedly is even more difficult than this one. The time to proficiency for Farsi is about 1,100 hours. 1,100 hours of class time. That's a very long time, and that's the average to reach proficiency. And if I'm aiming for proficiency, which I am, I still have some hours to put in yet. Anyway, that was kind of a short demonstration of how I use Google Translate and some of its pitfalls that, you know, you have to be careful with this thing. See? Just notice. Alright, thank you for tuning in. If you find this video or any of my other videos of value, please consider subscribing to my channel. Like this video, comment. You know the drill. And I'll talk to you guys later.